Okay, everybody. Well, you're welcome to the Fito Networks Festival. This event actually started in May. It's online, and we'll be rounding up sometime later this month in June. Um, you're all welcome to have fun, play a bit, connect, get comfortable in your space. Like I said earlier, we encourage you to turn on your cameras, no matter how bad where you are, the environment where you are is, we don't care. We just want everyone to feel at home, to feel relaxed, to feel comfortable. Uh, and we encourage you to actually turn on your video, but if you cannot, it's still fine. And like I said, share your name, your location, and why you're joining us today. We would really like to know. Like I said earlier, this is an online experience, and we have lots of fun things that we do here at the festival. But this very event is the workshop zone where we really get our hands dirty. And then we have some other places where we also have fun during the festival, like the pitch tent. We also have the tech corner if you want to enhance your tech skills. We have the bonfire sessions that are more of an intimate space where we connect and share our stories. We also have the obstacle course for those who would like to play some games. And so just a peek of the event we have for today. That's the governance and consent decision. I'm going to pass it on to the speakers we have here very soon to introduce themselves. And we are just going to learn how consent decision making can support the voices and contribution of folks from historically marginalized communities. Promises to be a very exciting session with lots of great speakers that we've gathered here today. I promise you, you're going to have fun. And just to keep you abreast of some of the activities we have lined up, we highly recommend you to sign up and join these events. Some other events we have coming up within the week and next week: how to coordinate an impact network, healing collective trauma through relationships, funding grassroots and indigenous communities, funding and connecting movements for gender equality, and how to facilitate deep learning spaces for learning architects. We're going to drop that in the chat, and you can sign up for these events. And also we have the WhatsApp arcade that we have set up. It's just a space where we connect further, where we play further outside the sessions. So feel free to use the link to join the WhatsApp group if you're still interested in keeping in touch, in making connections, and having fun, playing games, and staying abreast of information regarding the festival. I'm quickly going to hand over now to Fabian, and we'll take it up from there. Thank you all.
Thank you, Naka, for this wonderful introduction to all the other activities, and welcome everyone to this space and to this workshop. I will introduce myself. My name is Fabienne Pierre-Jacques. I am Network Director of Illuminate, a network devoted to system change, but specifically to centering equity and social justice within system change work. I have some very specific experience with consent, but my main motivation for wanting to be part of this workshop was I think there's so much more to learn about it, and it covers such a wide sphere of activities and subjects, as you will see as we go through the workshop. So just to go through quickly what we'll be doing in the next hour and a half, we'll have a breakout session right after I've introduced myself. Come out of this breakout session, at which point I will introduce our three speakers, and you'll get a chance to learn a little bit about what they do and their experience around the issue of consent and consent decision-making. And then we'll have another more extensive breakout where we'll have the opportunity to discuss and practice and look at different models and different ways that consent is experienced and explained. So that breakout will be a lot longer, and then we'll have a chance after that to do a harvest, and in between all that to do a Q&A with the different speakers. So to start with, we're going to do a breakout. We're going to share an image with you, and within the breakout, we're asking everybody to take some time and while they introduce themselves to each other, to talk about what that image represents for you. There are no right or wrong answers. We're just having fun here. And what that image looks like or represent for you. And what question or why are you here? Why did you want to come to this workshop today? This breakout will last around 5 minutes. So you have time to discuss those two questions. What does this image represent for you? And why are you here today? And we'll see you on the other side.
Okay, I also dropped the link to this image that I just shared in the chat. And I'm going to then open the rooms for 5 minutes. Enjoy your conversation.
I'd like to hear more about Michelle's relationship to peacocks.
They're beautiful.
Thirty-second buffer. Okay, welcome back. I think we have everyone. Fabienne, over to you.
Great. So I thought we'd do a little bit of a discussion about what were the surface for the reasons people were here. What was the interest? What motivated people to be here? I think we had 10 different groups. So if you feel comfortable to unmute, identify yourself, and give us a little bit of a feedback in the discussion in your breakout session. If you don't, that's fine too. You can share it in the chat. But I'm inviting anybody who's interested in sharing to unmute and share some of what came up for them. Okay, so nobody wants to share and talk right now.
I can share a little bit about what we talked about.
Sure.
Folks in my group, we were interested in learning about different governance models. Some of us are working with a number of disparate groups, but kind of with a shared purpose. So how to think about how to work together in ways that are more equitable and enable all of those different voices to be heard.
Thank you for breaking the ice. I'm asking anybody else if they have anything else they might want to share.
So hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. My camera, I mean, it may be coming on and off. I have poor internet, but in our group, what we talked about was that there is like an erosion of democracy and participation worldwide. It seems that I work in a private, in a corporation, but you even see it in governments or corporations or whatnot. So to us, it was important to be able to understand how how can we rescue that participation and democracy. And then the image we discussed, that was like a little bit too soon for us. We're not ready for the image, but in general terms, it showed to us like a one-man-up-ship, like all this display of power and arrogance. And I have all these, almost like a fake profile on Facebook. And then the interesting thing is how oblivious was the other participant, the other bird, I forgot their name, sorry, in the picture. So that's what we discussed.
Thank you very much. Any other group want to share?
Yeah, I can share a little bit with in Seattle, we have a thing called the Nourishing Networks Group, which is a distributed model of people who are volunteers who get together to create a local team of people that identify problems in their local community and then figure out ways to solve them, and then solve them, and then come back and do that over and over again. Now, what they do is they bring together a lot of different people from different service groups, government agencies, all kinds of religious organizations, all that very diverse, every demographic involved, and people getting along and figuring out they develop their own agendas, what they're going to do. It's not top down. It's they figure it out. They put together what they want to do, it's kind of one of those models that we found a lot of success in. And but I want to get some expertise from the world out there on other people that are doing these kind of things successfully.
Okay. So I'm understanding you wanted to have an opportunity to share your experience and also learn from other people's experience. Okay, well, thank you for that. As is expected, this is an 1.5 hour workshop, so we're not going to meet everybody's expectations, but I think we have quite a few options that might actually meet some expectations, because we do have a wide range of experience and a wide range of expertise within our speakers. And I'm convinced we have a wide range of experience and expertise within those who are attending the workshop. And we want to have opportunities also to have those exchanges, because sometimes they're quite rich. So to introduce our speakers, I am going to let them introduce themselves, but I just want to highlight who they are before I pass the baton for them to introduce themselves. Michelle Smith is a facilitator, coach, and consultant at Circle Forward. And she'll be speaking first. Brian Stout is a system curator and network weaver at Building Belonging. And Luz Ajrouge is an institutional relationship and network coordinator at the Latin American Center for Solidarity Service Learning. I'm inviting the speakers to both talk to us a little bit about themselves, first introduce who they are, their organization and their work and their relationship to the issue of consent decision-making, and also why they're here today. Just like you as participant, we'd like to know why you're here today. So, Michelle, I'll pass on to you. You're muted.
So I just want to make sure, you just want me to introduce myself, or shall I just get started?
I think we're going to get started and then we'll go into conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. I want to thank the organizers and you, Fabienne, and especially for your efforts and labor getting this together. So Circle Forward, we are a small firm, and we work specifically with networks to help them co-design their governance systems for liberatory governance that is equitable, transparent, that meets those values that we want. And so we support the people in these networks to navigate these complex systems change by equipping them with the skills and tools and practices for collaborative network governance. And consent-based decision-making is key to collaborative network governance. We call it the gateway. It's the gateway to, well, decision making is the gateway into governance, and consent as a principle is the key to distributed leadership, we believe. And we're getting the feedback that's this key to distributed leadership and to collaborative network governance. And I got into this by being a social activist and then a permaculturalist, and then getting really heartbroken about activism. And then I've just said, okay, well, maybe permaculture is a way that I can begin to have some kind of positive impact. And then I got introduced to sociocracy, and then through working with networks have expanded a little bit past sociocracy. But there are things that we've continued to lift up because communities continue to resonate with it and continue to want to adopt these practices. I'm going to share my screen for a moment. And this is a very unsophisticated graphic, but where we've gotten to lately, because a lot of folks who know anything about consent-based decision-making know about it from sociocracy or holacracy, where it's a very specific process. And our experience is that this is way bigger than one process. And we've identified this principle, this consent principle. And then there's a protocol that we've developed in community. There are practices, there are processes, and we've even identified some patterns. And so for us, the consent principle is this essence of collaboration. It's this commitment to engagement and trust among decision makers and those who are impacted by decisions to listen to each other and adapt when not in consent, while staying on track to make timely decisions. But put a little more simply and a little more personally, it's an agreement and a commitment that we're not going to force anybody to move forward when they're holding an objection. And I am not going to go forward when I'm holding an objection. I'm not going to go along to get along, and I'm not going to try to persuade or manipulate or coerce someone else to go past their objection. And the crucial point there is, what is an objection? And who and in what circumstance and how does one have the role of being someone who's bringing that, who has the role to bring objection in any particular context. The way we talk about objection, to keep it simple, is it's a risk we can't afford to take. I'm sensing a risk to our shared purpose or to my role that we can't afford to take. There's no eliminating risk, right? And especially in complexity. Everything's an experiment. But we're all circled around a shared purpose. Like, that's the fire we're all circled around, is that shared purpose. If I'm not involved in that shared purpose, then I'm not a person who's empowered with the power of that objection. And objections are treasure. This, to me, is another crucial point of what a culture of consent. The culture of consent is one where objections are considered treasure because they reveal the gaps in our awareness. And the idea of using consent for decision making is so that the system can see each other. I mean, and it's part of why we work in networks. It's because we need the system to be able to see each other, interact, and get together and move and collaborate so that we can move things forward. Some of the practices, please give me time if I'm running out of time. The practices some examples might be using rounds, evaluating and learning, making proposals, consistent, accessible recording and record keeping and sharing. Some of the processes can be sociocratic process, the advice process, liberating structures, dynamic facilitation. It depends on your context. Governance, what we've found is governance is super context specific. So to have just like one, I call it governance in a box. Our experiences, networks, there's been resistance to it. They were an objection to that. And then this is our consent protocol. And in the breakout room, my intention, unless someone wants something else, is to sort of help let people interact with that protocol. And go ahead and admit you. I think that's enough for now. I mean, that's sort of a little bit of I feel like I'm fire hosing people and I want to get some feedback or questions. Maybe Fabienne or someone can, or maybe my time's up.
No, not at all. But we are going to have more of a discussion around certain areas, and thank you for this introducing your framework and this
Thanks.
important way of conceiving it.
Should I speak a little
as we
bit
go
to
into
this
discussion
idea?
and people, I can't hear you.
Should I speak a little bit to this idea of how consent-based decision-making can take into account the power relationships we're seeking to shift?
Why don't we do that as a panel? We'll go shift through that question.
Great.
That way it'll be everybody will answer that question, because I think that was one of the
Okay,
we
great.
asked each other the question. I want to welcome Brian now. If he would like to talk a little bit about why he's here and what's his passion around consent.
Yeah. Thanks, Fabiana. Good to see you all. And thanks, Michelle, for setting the table there nicely so we know what we're talking about. My name is Brian Stout. I'm based in Southern Oregon on the West Coast on lands stewarded by the Shasta and Tacoma people. I am a father and a middle child, and my private hypothesis, which maybe we'll test with you all, is that most people drawn in network weaving are also middle children. Curious about that. Lifelong mediator. And yeah, I think the three questions that have animated my life are a deep curiosity and interest in belonging. I consider myself a student of belonging. A real interest in how power works and leadership. You can't see all of me, but I'm a very large-bodied person. I'm like 6'4", I'm 200 pounds. So I've always been, really curious about how bodies interact and what that means for power and how we relate to each other. Remains fascinating. And I'm really interested in how change happens, how we transform individually and collectively. And my interest in consent, it occurred to me growing up as a kid that like every system we're part of is based on coercion or domination, right? Like schools and churches and jobs. And so consent feels quite radical. And I daily practice with my kids who are now at that age where they can throw my words back at me. The other day, I picked my children up and took them to a dinner that we hadn't talked about as a family. And my eldest, who's 9, says, "Dad, I didn't consent to this." I'm like, fair point, kid. Yes, you did not. Let's talk about that. So I think there's something radical about it. And building belonging is a collective I'm part of. We strengthen movements that build belonging. So trying to work with those social movements that are interested in creating more space for everyone to belong. And we do so by convening what we call liberatory leaders, which is basically a way of recognizing that leadership is not about structural power, but about how we contribute to the whole. And folks are trying to heal themselves, trying to heal each other, trying to be in right relationship in order to transform systems and culture. So we think that small groups of folks who are working together to practice more liberatory ways of being is actually a transformative intervention. The 3 things we're working on as a group right now are 1, in the US-based context in North America, really trying to cultivate the capacities that can be the antidote to cancel culture. So how do we, inside of our movements, better relate to each other, organize around belonging? A second is one of my colleagues is leading a global migration network, recognizing for those of you who are in the EU elections this week, not great. The far right continues to gain ground largely around questions of xenophobia and anti-immigrant sentiment. So we're convening a group around what might it look like to organize migration efforts around this question of belonging rather than othering. And the third thing we're doing is an intervention called Belonging at Scale, which is inviting us to think about scale differently. If we associate scale, as I do, with sort of a colonial capitalist, bigger is better construct, what might it look like to reconceive scale that is anchored in emergence and sort of the fractal nature of change and collaboration? So that's a question we hold. I'm really excited to be here, really enjoying the process of working together this panel, and fun to see some folks in the call here, some who I know, others who are new to me, and excited to be in dialogue. So I'll pause here for introduction. Happy to step some more into some of these questions that we'll be holding together today.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Liz, I'll invite you now to give us a small presentation of your work. And yeah, why are you here and how do you feel about consent?
Muchas gracias. En realidad, el tema del consentimiento, is everyone understanding what I'm saying?
A translator.
Yes? No?
We get the
I
translator.
was speaking in Spanish. That's my mother tongue. Because in my experience as a South American and someone whose first language is not English, the first thing to visualize when talking about consent and consensus and agreement has to do with what language we speak in. And that is something that we are not always conscious of. Those of us whose, gracias, Jessica, thank you. That is something that we are not always aware of. And the fact that not all of us speak English and that we still work in English leaves many of us out of conversations. And I was speaking in Spanish, which is one of the languages most spoken anyway. Even though it's not English, it's still spoken by millions and millions of people. Imagine those languages that are spoken by not so many people, and the conversations that happen and the thoughts that appear and the knowledge that is created in languages that are not English. So before I go into more theoretical ideas, I wanted to kind of break the momentum for a minute, because I believe this is not something secondary. Keep in mind, again, all the knowledge that we are not aware of because we are not paying attention to this conversation. So I come from Argentina, from Buenos Aires in the deep south. Maybe some of you know where we are. I have been working in impact organizations and nonprofit organizations for maybe 30 years or so. And I have been working with networks for over 20. And I currently work and have been working in the last few years at the Latin American Center for Solidarity Service Learning, where we promote a more fraternal and participatory world by working with youth through education. One of our main areas of work has to do with networks. And why is that? Because we understand that networks are the best or a very good way to create systemic change. That is, not only have an impact on one community in one place, which is great and which is fundamental, but sharing or exchanging among these communities and all the practitioners and everyone involved in those processes, so that the change that we are able to generate is more powerful, more impactful, and more, systemic again, and more sustainable. So that's in a nutshell where I come from. Maybe I'm not answering your questions, Fabian. Please feel free to tell me, to repeat them if I need to focus on anything else.
No, that did answer the question. I am gonna ask the panel to discuss one of the questions we had agreed on, which was how does consent decision making and consent culture shifts our systems of inequality but while I was listening to Brian and Luz about something really, really fundamental came to my mind was Brian was talking about how important individual relationships and building blocks and the way we relate to each other in small units is such an important way to make change happen, to actually make this change happen. Was Luz also brought into something really amazing, which was how the networks are such an important mechanism to actually spread that change beyond individuals and beyond communities. I think that's really important because we're here also as network members, and also we wanted to look at how consent decision making can be embedded in our networks, in our work. So I just wanted to point out because that was an amazing connections for me. So yeah, so how can consent, whether we're talking about the very structured way that Michelle introduced to us, which is one way, but not the only way. There's different organization and different models of how consent work. How can consent shift those the dominant ways of which we practice democracy, which how does that contribute to really to social justice work and to the work we do?
Do you want to start? Shall I start? Would someone else like to start? I want to start by clarifying something that it sounds like I wasn't clear about. With the work that Circle Forward is doing around consent is very much about trying to understand that there's this principle that underlies consent, which is not going past objection, which is not, when someone is out of their range of tolerance, when it's not going past that objection, not ignoring it, not trying to go around it, not trying to get more votes than it. It's that very principle. And I think because it's a principle, it works at every level, from the individual to the social to the corporate. And then it's the practices and the processes that there's a lot of. There's a lot of those. But I'm going to stand on the idea for the claim that there's this principle of nonviolence that is embodied in this principle of consent. And I'll quote my partner Dee, who's a Black woman, who said to me, the opposite of consent is violence. It's force, forcing. So, and then in a culture of consent, one of the things that I think we build a culture of consent in our organizations or networks, one decision at a time, one interaction at a time. We build trust or we break trust, one decision at a time that we make together. And the learning and then it's practices, and we can try a lot of things, and we understand that this is deeply transformative work. It's transformative to our culture, to our networks, and it's going to work on us inside too, because we're going to find the places where I let myself go past my objection because of whatever the shadow power dynamic or a desire for belonging. And then what happens when I'm out of objection for any extended period of time? Well, just like an ecosystem where each member's needs need to be met within ranges, like the ecosystem of a stream or a mountain stream or a river. When a certain member is forced to live outside their range of tolerance for any length of time, they stop participating, they migrate out, they stop reproducing, they die. Similarly, when I let myself, or I am forced to, live outside my range of tolerance, I'm going to leave. I'm going to sandbag. That means like I'm not going to, that quiet quitting that we hear about, I'm going to sabotage. I'm going to do something because people don't live in objection. Organisms don't just live there unless forced to, and then they are continually trying to get out. So that's the visceral experience I think I'm trying to say, to convey. And then what are we going to set up? How are we going to set up our agreements, our communications, our evaluation and learning, all of those? That's all governance, and that's the places where consent is the principle that I think creates that essence of collaboration. And then after that, it's just like, well, which practice or process do we want to use? And what are we going to learn from that? Because we're probably going to, because we're all learning. We're the transitional generation trying to get this culture to a place that's nonviolent and that's regenerative. So we're the ones learning and practices, and we just got to remember that we want to stay in the practicing. Okay, that's my little.
So I wanted to pick up on the notion of embodiment and in terms of the question, because like Luz, it's interesting the exercise with the language, with what so much lives in language. But language is also expression of culture. I speak 3 languages. I'm particularly fond of one, which is Haitian Creole, because it represents something very real to me. It represents a culture that's being in the country, and it represents so much. And it is not a world language. It is not Spanish, and it is not English, and it is not French. So when I come into a space, when we talk about shared purpose, constructing shared purpose, I come with a different identity into a space. How do you construct shared purpose around that? And how is it embodied in, first of all, our physical body, then our groups, our families, and then our networks? So maybe we can talk about that a little bit more. Like, how do you, when I bring that identity into a space and we're constructing shared purpose, because that's the readiness before the actual government structure. What does that look like, and how do you construct that?
I'm
asking from a person with multiple identities.
Well, all of us are, I would say. The thing is that at times in a way, society forces us to pick one that is more, it's more common or more powerful, and therefore we can make better use of that one identity. But if you ask any of us or most of us, we probably are a combination of different cultures, from our mother's side, from our father's side, from the territory in which we were born or in which we were raised, the school we went to, the friends we made, etc. And when we need to pick one or two, and work from there, what I see that happens is that on the one hand, a lot is lost, because there's a lot of our richness that is left out. But apart from that, processes get to be less organic, because we are not fully there. We are dressed in a certain way, our hair is in a certain way, we speak in a certain way, but there's a big part of us that is not present at that moment. And therefore, the richness that we may add to this particular process is much smaller. And if we are 10 people, but we're actually representing 3 or 4 because a big part of us is left outside, then this process will not be as rich, as useful, as impactful, as great as it could be. And this thing that I'm describing in one particular process or one particular group, the same happens at a bigger level. I mean, when decisions are made without taking into account certain identity groups, certain territorial groups, etc., then decisions are not as sound, and they're not as sustainable, and they're not as powerful, let's say, or useful. That's the reason why everyone needs to be involved. It's not only a question of, there's some sound. It's not
People
only
need
a
to
Background
mute
question.
it.
information. I'm getting some
Thank you.
background noise. Okay.
Mhm.
So
Thank you.
I wanted to
It's not,
invite
sorry, it's not, let
Brian
me finish
to
the
talk
idea.
about
It's not only a question of like values that we want everyone involved because we are good people. It's not only that too, but it's also a question of effectiveness. Our decisions are better if everyone is taken into account. They are more sustainable and they are better decisions, apart from the fact that we are all good, nice people.
We don't do it to be nice. We do it because it's what's going to work.
Yeah,
And
I
we've
think
seen
that
the other way it's not working too well. So we've tried that and it's not working. We need to try
Perfection is
something.
not our competition. We're not in competition with perfection. I'm sorry, go ahead.
well,
Tom.
I think the provocation here is like, I kind of have two different reactions. Like one is, I think because we have so little experience of embodied consent culture, most of us, I suspect, grew up in families where consent wasn't actually asked for as children. That consent actually does feel quite radical, and it is, and I don't want to take that away. But a big part of me also resists the idea that consent is the bar we're striving for. I think there's something, just reflecting on these elections in the EU and the coming ones in the US, or South Africa for that matter, democracy is not actually interested in consent by and large. We say consent of the governed, but our majoritarian system actually doesn't care what the minority thinks, right? All we need is a majority. And so the closest thing we have to, we talk about democracy as a value is actually not really about consent. And so I think a lot of us have this, we don't have an embodied experience of what it's like to have our opinions truly matter. And that's more true the farther you are from dominant culture. And so for me, I'm interested in consent, but I really want consent to be the floor, right? Like that's the absolute baseline for interacting with other humans. And I think it's much, the conversation around consent culture is easiest to see in the realm of sex, where we made huge progress, thank God, that we're now talking about it. But it's such a low bar. Like I think most of us don't want to be in relationships where it's like, are you willing? Is not a very attractive way to enter a relationship. It's much more compelling about, do you want? And so I want to create space, like let's strive for consent, but I'm actually much more interested in desire. Like what do people actually want and how do we create that together? And so I wrestle with this question, Fabian, because it's, we're so far from a consent culture that it does feel radical. And I almost want to reject the notion that it's radical. It's only radical because our systems are so predicated on domination and coercion. Yeah. So can we take consent culture as a baseline and inside of that reach for desire and for what we really want? And I think that, to your point about embodiment, and I know we'll pivot to breakouts in just a second so folks can have a chance to move into practice. But Adrienne Maree Brown, who's written this book on emergent strategy and pleasure activism, many of you are probably familiar with her work, reminds us that consent lives in the body. Like that's where we know. And I'm reminded of this every day with my kids. It's effortless for them. They know exactly whether they want to hug or not. They're so in touch with their bodies. And those of us adults have lost that skill because our societies have jumped it out of us. And so there's an effort now. I'm encouraged to see so many folks here in this session. Like we're trying to reclaim connection to our bodies. We're more in touch with consent and hopefully desire. I'll put in the chat, JF.
Objection also lives in the body. Like that's when we know. And I just want to
know.
I'm going to close. I'm going to close the panel discussion because we're going to go into breakout rooms, and we have each of our speakers are going to actually lead the 3 breakouts. So you'd have a chance to dig more into the different aspects. I think in the chat, we can put the 3 breakouts. One of them will be a room led by Luz about peer-to-peer exchange around consent, how it is practiced in the field. And if you have experience to share, if you would like to learn a little bit more about her experience or wide experience in that. So there'll be a breakout on that. Michelle will lead a breakout around the consent principles and the structures, but is very open to letting it explore other aspects. And Brian, we will be leading, I will be participating in embodiment. What does it mean? And how do we, in practice, experience giving consent? How does it feel in our body, or not giving consent? So those are a short description of the 3 breakout rooms. I don't know if any of the speakers wanted to be more specific than that before we break out, or is that
All is well.
fine?
Maybe just to remind folks that in the context of the Fido Festival, that this is intended to be a workshop, a place to do practice. And so we're trying to set up a framework because this topic is so big, but really this invitation is now for y'all to practice. If you want to practice the protocols of consent decision-making, Michelle's great for that. If you want to grapple some of the power dynamics of where consent lives and how we navigate it and kind of do some pure workshopping, Luz will be holding space. And then Fabienne and I are going to demo and invite you into one-on-one practice around how do you get in touch with the yes and no that lives in your body. It'll just be a chance to practice. And then we'll come back on the other end to debrief and share.
Okay, just a quick one on how to actually do this. I'm going to open the breakouts now, and you'll be able to choose whichever breakout you want. So I'm going to open now. Everyone should have on the bottom of their screen something that says breakout rooms. You might have to click the 3 dots, and you will see a list of breakouts. Please choose one of the first 3, either with Michelle, Luz, or Brian and Fabienne. There's a few others, but please ignore those. Those will only be used afterwards. And so you can start moving into them. If you need help, let me know. I'll stay back a few minutes to help you move into breakouts if necessary.
Yeah, Carolina, I'm not sure what I'm seeing here. How do I?
I will help you. I'll move you to your breakout.
I found it.
Okay, perfect. Okay. See that we still have a few folks here. Does anyone need help moving into breakouts? Oh. Okay, I think almost everyone. Anne and Phil, do you need any help?
Yeah, I probably do actually. Yeah, so I'm looking to go into the hands-on consent making peer dialogue, please.
Okay, lovely. Okay, perfect. I think we have everyone back. Yeah, I think, yeah, rooms are closed, everyone's here. Over to you, Fabienne.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I can't, okay, there it is. Now I'm seeing more that everyone is actually back. So we're gonna spend the next few minutes. I wanted to open the floor to questions, if there's any questions. So maybe I'll do it in 2 parts. 5 minutes where we can debrief and talk a little bit about what happened in the breakout rooms, if there's any feedback, because in our breakout room, we did the embodiment piece and we didn't debrief that and we didn't have a chance to talk about it. So, and then the last part would be if there are any specific questions, inquiries for the speakers or Fido Network specifically around this workshop or so. First, I'll start with debriefing or feedback from the breakout rooms? I'll start with the embodiment workshop because that's the one I was in and we didn't get a chance to provide feedback. Anybody wants to talk about how they experienced the exercise that was presented? No one.
Jess was
I
Jess
think,
was putting up her hand.
I can speak. I just
Okay.
couldn't raise my hand. Yeah, so we were asked to pair up, and one person to ask the other something outrageous, something that you can possibly say yes to, but to nevertheless say yes, to ask the other person to always say yes. And then we were asked to notice how each of us felt about that. And I guess, yeah, it was really, really difficult. It was really awkward. And you do almost anything to actually ask an honest question. I found that they use lots of deconfliction methods to try to soften the blow. I was asking the question. And I guess we moved into a more general conversation about whether this issue around consent and why we find it so difficult is because fundamentally we find conflict so difficult. And so whether we're kind of dancing around an idea about what it really means to be in conflict with one another. And that I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that. I'm trying to find my workshop partner. If you come.
Oh yeah. So like yeah, how just said that like like we talk about the connection with ourselves and like how being able to like how like have to like being have to say like yes despite the fact that we feel no, and like we kind of like talk about the governance also like and like the like many people despite the fact that like many people struggle with saying no, but they have to say yes anyway. So like is it really consent? Like we talk about this it was very insightful. It was very good. Yeah.
Good. I'm going to take comments from one of the other breakout rooms then. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Okay.
Phil seems to be raising his hand. Phil Person.
Thank you.
If you want to unmute and talk, great, thanks.
Yeah, so we in our group, I think we talked about the culture of democracy and how in different places of the world that expectation and that culture was different. So we specifically talked we talked about the culture of democracy and decision making and consent in the UK and the US, but also in Argentina, and how our histories kind of bring us to where we are now. And sometimes there can be misconceptions about what appears to be a functioning democracy when in particular it isn't. So we've talked about how, from my point of view in the UK, there's very much a culture now of thinking in terms of I instead of we. And in terms of consent, that feels quite difficult, So I think culturally there's a deficit there, which I think was shared with our colleagues in both Argentina and in the US as well. So it feels like there's that really good quote that the old world is dead and the new world is yet to be born. And it feels like that we're in that process of creating that new world, but in different parts of the world, we're at different points of that journey. And it's easy, I think, one of the things that struck me was it's easy to say that old world is dead. And in the UK and in Europe and in the US, that comes as a bit of a shock. And then you realize that in a lot of places in the world where there's been conflict and there have been really destructive governments, I think as was mentioned in our breakout room, there's a culture of community kind of rising up and kind of taking the lead and working together. But I think in other parts of the world, there is not that culture at the moment because we've had fairly stable government for a while. And this feels like, so when we say the old world has gone, for a lot of people, the old world went decades ago, went a long, long time ago. And so there's a lot that I think we can learn, and there's an understanding that we're on different parts of this journey in terms of transformational governance and in terms of community. So that understanding of where we are in the journey, I think, is really important in this. And I think that came out of our conversation quite clearly. And it was an interesting conversation because of that.
Thank you. The last one. Is there anybody who wants to speak to the third breakout room with Michelle? Because we're really short on time right now. And okay.
We were a very small group and we looked at the protocol, and there were a few specific questions about application of consent in decision-making spaces. We talked a little bit about some of the little stealthy things a person can do if they're not in a culture of consent, but when in a decision-making place. And then we looked at we're invited to look at some of the decisions that were alive in their network and see where they were in the protocol and how they could be used. And then we ran out of time.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for participating. I think we were very ambitious in what we wanted to do today. We did a bit of everything. And each and every one of the breakouts could be an hour and a half workshop. So I want to really thank Michelle, Luz, and Brian for participating and for devoting the time and the energy to prepare this, and Fido Network for inviting all of us on this journey, which I hope is going to be a dedication to the inquiry around consent within networks. This is one workshop, but there's certainly a lot of spaces to grow and to think and to learn about it in so many different levels. So I'm going to pass on to Naga to do
Naga, before you do, I put a link into our resources, and it's a starter kit of many resources that are available to you as you're doing governance co-design in your networks. I put that link right there. So please feel welcome to access that if you want to dive deeper into some of the questions you may have.
Thanks for that. And I want to also tell everybody, all our speakers are also on LinkedIn. You can connect with them. Their organizations are also named in the Fido Network publicity and marketing that went out, so you can link with them through that. So there's other ways to continue this conversation, and I encourage you to do so, because it is such an important conversation about how we move forward in creating this future that actually some of us, I don't believe there's a future out there. I think we create it every day as we move through it in the decision we make and how we live with each other. And consent is a very big part of that. I'm going to pass it on to Naga, who will take over and
thanks Fabian. Thanks to our great speakers. Don't hop off yet, because we have a bit of information to share with you all. So I encourage you to just stay put just a few more minutes. I'll just quickly share my screen. We still encourage everyone to keep connecting, keep playing and engaging with yourselves. I'll quickly share in the prompt ways you can connect with us at FITO. And so we have the ticket tree house where you could get all the tickets for the remaining sessions that we have lined up. Encourage you to check through and see what works for you and where you feel you'll get to learn some more and get some more information from. We also have the WhatsApp arcade group, like I said earlier, where it's a space where we continue these conversations and connections. We're playing a whole lot of games that are bringing people together, sharing a lot of resources. And so if it's something you feel comfortable with, you can hop off and join the WhatsApp arcade group. I've also shared the link on how to join. Just click on the link and you'll be in. And also we have our needs and offers market. This is a very important part that I also encourage you all to go through because we know you all have needs, you all have things that you're looking forward to, and we can get all that done in just this session. So we encourage you to fill out the form, specify your needs, whatever you need. That's why we are here as a network to connect you to resources and people that can meet those needs. We also have the offers. So if you're skilled, if you have places where you have your strengths, there are things, there are apps or texts that you are very comfortable and conversant with, ways that you have overcame challenges and tools that are working for you. We also encourage you to share that in the offers market. And we also try to link you to people where you could also share that knowledge and help them in their networks. So I'd call everyone, thank you for viewing. I'll just encourage everyone to unmute yourself and say goodbye in your language, in any language at all you feel comfortable with. It's been an amazing time with you all. I hope you had fun. Thanks to our speakers, thanks to my colleague Carolina, and thanks to everyone. So please unmute yourselves and say goodbye. For those of you who still want to hang around and connect some more, we are here for you. The room will still be open. All right.
Gracias. Gracias a todos.
Bye.
Luego.
Thank you. It's
Gracias.
late, so I'm gonna go. Bye.
So.
See you later.